In today's video, I'll be talking to you about how I made 107 placements in just 1 week and how 50% of those went temp to perm. For those of you who are new here, my name's Jessica Kimber. I've been a recruiter for over 16 years now, and I own my own recruitment agency, and I also own a company called Rare, which offers personal branding and training programs specifically for recruiters to become rare and to become the absolute best recruiters in the market. Now, before I get into how I made 107 placements in just 1 week, I'm going to go back to when I actually started in recruitment and how I got into this, because the foundations of how I've recruited over the years in any industry in multiple companies has actually remained the same. I am a true believer that these principles and these foundations that I'm going to share with you today can also help you accelerate your results as a recruiter as well, because there's some real core traits that if you can really work on them and perfect, it doesn't matter what you recruit, you can absolutely crush it. Okay, so casting all the way back to 2008, I first started in a technical recruitment agency. I was the administrator. I just finished school. I wanted some pocket money to go on holiday with my friends and go out at the weekends. And I very quickly realized how much money recruitment consultants could make. And I really aspired to become a recruitment consultant. But of course, being 16 years old and being fresh out of school, my boss was kind of like, bit hesitant to give me a role as a resourcer, but we got very busy, and naturally me keep putting my hand up, I started getting given 1 or 2 roles to work on and just help source ultimately. And that started going really well quite quickly actually. And my first ever placement was I recruited a stress engineer. I relocated him from France over to Switzerland. He was a stress engineer on aircrafts, and I helped move his family across, and the fee was something like £13,000, which is about $26,000. And my company just actually couldn't believe that I'd filled this role at like 17 years old or something super young. And from there, I just started getting more and more roles to work on. And within a couple of years, I was actually managing my own accounts. So I had some really large aviation accounts, and I was recruiting technical roles, so blue collar roles as well as engineering roles as well. And it was all temp, it was all project-based work. And I was recruiting between 30 to 60 temp roles every single month. Now, you have to remember that I thought that was normal back then. Like, this is my first experience in recruitment. I wasn't aware that 30 to 60 was a super high amount. And these jobs were mechanical fitters, mechanical engineers, avionics engineers, stress engineers, B1 license engineers, B2 license engineers. Ultimately, anybody who fixed an aircraft or even designed an aircraft. I was recruiting some white collar design engineer roles as well. I would place these people into employment, but I was also working for clients between London, Switzerland and France as well. So again, what I was doing is I was having a look at any aviation company whose staff held a particular license, so they were able to work on these particular aircrafts. I would tap into every single one of their workers who I could potentially help, and I would build a relationship with them. And this was by this point about 2011, 2012, and I was actually using LinkedIn and connecting with them and building community groups, because I was actually getting people, and bearing in mind I was still recruiting temp at this time, it was very much project-based work. So if there was an aircraft that needed particular maintenance, I would put them out on site for like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. So I was persuading people from everywhere in Europe, so Portugal was a big one that I focused on, and I was persuading them to take their annual leave to go over to Switzerland and France to fix these aircrafts. And I now realise how hard that was, but at the time I thought that was totally normal. And it definitely wasn't about just chucking an advert up online and getting applications, because you just weren't able to get them that way if you're moving people in and out of country. So I was always very much used to headhunting, market mapping, finding out who had the right qualifications for what I needed, and then building relationships and building a community. So community is something I really want to speak to you about in this video as well, because it's something I do to this day. I've been building communities for the last 15 years in every single type of role industry that I've recruited in, and it's how I've achieved the results that I've achieved. Honestly, without building the communities and having that network and having that reputation and being known in that space, it would have been impossible for me to recruit, because I just wouldn't have got the referrals. So quite often what would happen is I would persuade a set of people to go out to Switzerland, fix these aircrafts, and then they'd get paid quite well. So then they'd go and tell their friends, and I'd incentivize them to go and tell their friends, and then their friends would ask to register with me for the next intake. So the next lot of shifts that we would have overseas, I would then send their friends out, and so on and so forth. But the way I was able to maintain this was through LinkedIn community groups. And like I said, this was back 10 years ago now. So it's when social media wasn't even really a thing. I also wasn't posting any content at that point as well. Content wasn't a thing at all. I think Instagram had probably just come out even around then. I remember I had it, but it wasn't a big thing like influencer or content marketing or becoming an authority, just wasn't. But it was all community based. I then, after about 4 years in that particular role, I moved to Australia, in Sydney, Australia, and I got a role at Hayes Recruitment, who sponsored me at the time. And I was also working on a temp desk, a temp accounting and finance desk. And what I did ultimately was use exactly the same principles that I had used to recruit engineers and blue collar workers, but applied that to accounting and finance. So I had usually on average between 65 to 75 temps out on site at any one time, and I did exactly the same, where I would build a community group. I would operate at a very fast pace as well. So something I should have mentioned when I was recruiting in aviation and engineering is I was only able to place 30 to 60 people per month due to the pace that I could operate in. And I think when it comes to running a temp desk, that's absolutely critical because it is numbers. Like the more people you speak to, the more people you can put into employment very quickly, the more placements that you'll make. So again, took that over to the accounting and finance desk at Hayes, worked at a fast pace, built a community, built a referral program, and followed my LinkedIn strategy where I would do consistent outreach and build all sorts of talent pools. And I would continuously nurture this pool of people so when they were ready to move, they always had me in their mind because I always touch base with them very regularly, and I didn't just leave them to go rogue and go and apply for jobs and register with other recruiters. So I was pretty successful when I was working at Hayes and working on that desk in accounting and finance. And then there became the opportunity for me to move on site to Suncorp. So I was still working through Hayes at this point, but I secured a role where I was able to manage the MSP on site and manage all of the temps for Suncorp nationally. So to give you an idea, I do track everything I've ever done in terms of my placements because I love to know stats and figures. But in the first year I was there, I actually placed 585 people into employment. So the way it works at Suncorp and the way it works in the insurance industry overall is there's something called catastrophic event season. So in Australia, we quite often get storms, tornadoes, things like that, and hailstorms. So vehicles and properties quite often get damaged or flooded. And when that happens, the call centres go crazy and they ramp up the numbers. So I was predominantly recruiting those type of roles. However, I recruited all levels of temp roles across the entire business. So I was doing a lot of IT and project services as well in there. But what actually happened and the way I was able to recruit 107 roles in just 1 week is we had a catastrophic event. And this was, I believe this was 2020, if I'm not mistaken. It was Christmas 2020. It was like 2 days before. There was a crazy hailstorm in Sydney. Might have been 2019, but either way, one of those years. And on the 23rd of December, there was a crazy hailstorm. And I thought I was about to have Christmas off, and that never happened. But what happened instead is I had something like 200 roles to recruit instantly. So what I did is what I'd usually done. I went out to my community, and at this point, because I was recruiting a lot of call center roles, I had a big community on a Facebook group, and I also had a fairly big community on LinkedIn that I was using for referrals, but I was doing a lot on Facebook at this time. I also had a humongous talent pool that I stayed on top of, and out of that, what I then did was reach out to all of these people in the talent pool. And off the back of that, I was speaking to, I would say, 30 to 40 people every single day. And off the back of people that I was calling, I probably had a 1 in 2 fill rate. So let's just say I'd call 40 people, I would make 20 placements off the back of that. But the only reason I was able to do that is because I preempted, I knew it was event season, so I had these massive talent pools. I didn't just wait for a storm to come and say, oh, I need to go and build a community now. Who do I speak to first? Let me chuck a job advert up. I already had immediate access to these people. And again, it came from social media and it came from my community. And it came off the back of my ability to work at such speed and such pace. So in the end, the first week after Christmas, I had 107 people start in that 1 week. The following week, I think I had something like 56. So, I mean, in theory, I had 160 odd people start in 2 weeks. What then happened is June rolled around, being 6 months later. And these people who were initially in contracts, when there's an event, typically they'll get hired for like 12 weeks. And then sometimes that will keep rolling, depending on how many calls and whether the call volumes drop off. But in this particular instance, they actually needed a lot of people to stay on. So the contracts were rolling for 6 months. And then 50% of them actually went temp to perm, which was, of course, a very healthy commission paycheck, which was actually just before I applied for my permanent residency. So it was amazing. But the point I'm trying to make is that I've recruited in engineering, aviation, accounting and finance, office support, project services, IT, insurance. But the principles and the foundations of how I've recruited and been successful in all of these are exactly the same. So operating at that high pace, like I've said, utilizing social media and becoming the absolute go-to in that space and preempting who you need to speak to because they're already in your network and they already trust you. And finally, building a community. So however you do that, find a way to build a community and a network of people who are, number one, available when you are looking to fill roles, or number two, come to you when they are ready to move positions. The other luxury of building a community is quite often you'll actually build a really solid referral lead generation strategy that way as well. Because these people already trust you. And if you've already done goodwill and you've connected with them and built a relationship, people will return the favor and reciprocate your goodwill as well. As many of you know, I have built a highly successful personal brand on LinkedIn in the last 2 years. I've got almost 18,000 followers now. I've only actually been posting content and had a content strategy for 2 years. For the 13 years before that, yes, I was using social media and building communities, but it accelerated due to my content strategy. But ultimately, the foundations of how I've recruited strategically have never actually changed. In fact, I'm really not one of those recruiters that just hammers the phone 30, 40, 50 calls per day. I've never had to be that type of recruiter either, because I've always been highly successful and filled all of my roles using a relationship-driven strategy and using a social media and community-based strategy. If you can put that in place, you don't need to just hammer the phones and speak to as many people as possible and have all these first touch points, because you've got a pool of people that you can go to whenever's needed, and that will come back to you as well. If you're a recruiter who does rely solely on manual activities where one-on-one you're doing your business development calls, you're chasing the database, you're ad chasing, you're chasing jobs off LinkedIn, I'm not saying you need to stop doing that, because if there's a job there, there's a job there and you could fill that. But if you have this strategy working for you in the background where you have that community and have a strong social media presence, I can guarantee you'll never have to chase a really high volume of leads again, because it's more so quality over quantity. So if you are interested in learning how to use social media, and in particular LinkedIn, to build a personal brand and automate the lead generation process for you, you need to access the Rare app, which is personal branding and training programs for recruiters. The Rare app can be downloaded in Apple Store or Google Play, or you can also access via the web as well. I'll leave a link in the description for you so you can get access to that. There is some free training before you sign up, so you don't need to sign up immediately if you want to give it a little go first and try it out and see what it's all about. But I definitely recommend you check it out, because I can really help you automate that lead generation process and accelerate your results whilst saving time, effort and energy and not having to do everything manual. So if this video did help you think a little bit differently at least, please do give me a thumbs up and hit subscribe to be notified of new videos which I'll post weekly.